How's it going, everybody? I'm Tombstone, and this is Tombstone's Takes. I'm a librarian and an archivist, and I love to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and interesting about books. Today, we are going to be talking about a novella, one that I absolutely adore and love. It's called Mapping the Interior by Stephen Graham Jones. And hey, don't click away because I said novella. Don't ever click away because I said short story or short fiction. These things need love too, and there's so much great stuff out there that you can read them at different times and still enjoy your novels. We're going to hop right into this. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and interesting about this book because I love to talk about books. So let's get into it. Before we get into the good, let me tell you what this book is billed about, what the premise is. If you read the cover jacket or the cover jacket copy or the dust jacket copy, the back cover blurb, whatever you want to call it, if you read it, it talks about Junior, and Junior's dad has recently passed away in mysterious ways, and one day he sees the apparition of his father. That's how it's billed. That's how you're going to get it. Are you going to get a ghost story? Are you going to get other monsters? I'm not sure. Well, I am sure because I read the book, but you're not sure because this is billed as a horror story. But read it. So what's good about this book? Well, what's not good about this book? I'll tell you what's not good about this book in a second. But it's only about 100 pages. You can read it quick. You're going to enjoy it. The first thing I loved is Junior. I love his character development. I love the first person point of view in this story and how Junior weaves the tale of what happened to him when it was young and ties it up with his current age. I love that narrative. I loved the development between Junior and his brother Dino, who has seizures, and it's given them problems socially and at home, and how that ties into the horror of the story. I love the fact that you can, although Junior's definitely a teenager, you can still see the love of his mom in this story, and it just hits right as you go throughout him telling you what's happened with his father and how he's starting to ask about his father and what his father was like because he's seen this apparition. What else is good about this book? Now, a lot of people quibble over what is horror exactly. Not everything's going to scare everybody. Different things scare me than scare you. And so I won't find some things scary and other people won't find things scary. So yeah, do I think this is scary? I think there are things in this book that can scare you, yes. I think some of these things that might scare you are tied to the real world phenomenon rather than the supernatural phenomenon. And I think that that's okay. I think that sometimes that is what horror does well, especially when you're exploring themes of grief, loss, or pain. I think it does it well throughout this book. It explores those themes and more. And what is ultimately a touching tale about how a boy and a man is resolving his feelings about his family relationships. Another thing that I think is really good is there are some aspects of this that I wouldn't call supernatural aspects. They might actually be more like magical realism aspects. And I see those aspects in a lot of different native voices and authors that I love. If you ever read Louise Erdrich, like Tracks or The Bingo Palace or any of those works, if you've read Susan Powers, The Grass Dancer, if you've ever read Sherman Alexie or any of the other great voices that I even see some of this in James Welch, The Death of Jim Loney, and Fool's Crow, those kinds of books. If you've ever read a lot of the native works, you can see how a lot of visions and magical realism are tied into their culture in those books. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's done really well in this story. And it makes for a good tale, especially when it gets to the scary parts. So what's bad about this book? I have one point that I'm really going to say. I just defended this as a novella. I still think that it's great as a novella, but I do think it could have been 20 pages longer. There's one situation towards the end where I felt was just a little bit underdeveloped. I'm not going to tell you what it is because spoilers, surprise, and this is a spoiler-free review. So I'm going to take a half a star off of that for that. Half a star? Didn't I just go over this in my last video? I don't give out stars. Give out tombstones. So half a tombstone. Slice through that stone. Falling, crumbling. But let's move on to the ugly. What's ugly about this book? Well, what I think is ugly about this book really is the cover. I really didn't like this cover at all. Well, the graphic design is pretty good, and graphic design in general in books these days is pretty good, but sometimes I just don't know that it's a horror story. I don't know that it's a fantasy story, or I don't know what it's supposed to be. And yeah, the graphic design may be cool and it may look cool, but it may fail in saying, do I want to pick up that book? Because for some reason, books just forget about branding these days. Like, come on. We all know we love covers. We all know we judge books on covers, even though we say that we shouldn't and we know that we shouldn't. But what ends up happening is I might push this book way down the queue because of its cover, and that's not fair to books. And this is a book that deserves to be read. Stephen Graham Jones, Mapping the Interior. We'll get into more in just a second. Now, what's interesting about this book? I think there's a quote on the back cover of the book from Richard Kadrey. It says, Stephen Graham Jones' chilling Mapping the Interior is part S.E. Hinton and part Shirley Jackson. And I love that story because, I love that quote because it encapsulates and embodies what this work is. At times it's social commentary, yes. At times it's horror, yes. But in those things, Stephen Graham Jones never sacrifices at the core his story, and he can do it all without becoming pedantic or preachy, and that's really awesome, and it never takes me out of the story. I never am in a place where I think, oh, that's the author, not the characters. And when that happens in a book, I might still enjoy the book, but sometimes I'm like, it just takes me out of the story and brings down the enjoyment a little bit, but that never happens in Stephen Graham Jones's work. He's so good at it. So I find that really interesting how effortlessly he seems to do that. Now, how many tombstones am I going to give this book? I'm going to give this book 4 tombstones, which for a lot of people would be 5 because people might not be complaining about the cover. I'm taking a half star off the cover. And then I'm going to take a half star off because I felt a little bit like it could have been developed just a tad bit more. But other than that, it doesn't really taking off that star doesn't tell you how emotionally invested I was in this story and seeing the relationship between Junior and Dino, and Junior and his father, and Junior and his mom. And all 3 of those different relationships make an impact on this story and how it plays out. And if you like relationships being at the heart of your horror, then you're going to love this book like I did. Read it. Go read a lot of other novellas and short fiction. Thanks for watching. This has been Tombstone's Takes. I'm going to be posting some other stuff soon. Give me a like and subscribe if you feel like it. We'll talk to you later.